Hi, Fola.
Hi.
Thank you so much for having me over.
Yeah, no problem. Welcome on in. Hi, I'm Fola. I'm a Miami-born artist, born and raised here. I'm a multidisciplinary artist as well, mostly focusing on printmaking, also working with archives, and just involving fibers and dyeing practice in it too.
Gosh, thank you so much. So, how long have you been in this studio?
I've been here actually since October of last year, so it's been a while that I've been here and settling in. I've mostly been here like a couple of days of the week. Usually around nighttime, I come into my studio space.
Do you love it?
Yes, I do. Especially like just the idea of privacy within this room specifically, and then also being able to have this wall space and being able to play around with like the idea of like sculptures and figuring out what imagery I want to put on it too, since this is like a work in progress.
I'm a big fan of your work.
Thank you so much.
Because I know that you deal, and I'm going to ask you to explain to the viewers, you deal in hauntology.
Yes.
What is it about it that just inspires your work?
Yeah, I believe like around my undergrad, closer to my junior and senior year, I was really focusing on taking classes that revolve around like archives, revolve around research really, since most of my practice involves like mostly historical elements into it too. So figuring out how I could involve hauntology, which is the study of the past, how ghosts kind of appear within like spaces within the mind especially, and how that kind of carries itself into like memory, especially with trauma too. So figuring out how archives play a role with hauntology, especially with the idea of ghosts and how they call for attention. So this idea of remembering and bringing back to oneself, especially in the space, that's what's kind of brought me into the study of hauntology, especially with how that's also connected back to enslavement narratives, especially with people who have been documenting their own experiences with the transatlantic slave trade, and just that aspect of ghosts really I'm kind of been interested in.
And you've always you had an interest in it?
Yeah, like I was that kid who was really interested in like mythology, especially ghosts, vampires, werewolves. Like I was really obsessed with like learning more about mythology and how that can at least carry a glimpse into culture, especially with hauntology too, and how this idea of Toni Morrison, especially with her book Beloved, that kind of also connects back to hauntology, this call and response, and how yeah, trauma still lingers, and yeah, those glimpses of the past that still connect back to the present and the future.
So you incorporate a lot of archival items and materials in your work. Sometimes it's found images, it could be letters. How do you decide what works and how do you find them?
I usually go into just different domains like university websites or just private collections really, like the National Archive or Florida Memory, just looking into different sources that have public domain images too, since a lot of the work that I've done, especially with archival work, has to do with copyright, knowing and understanding copyright in order for you to at least utilize these images, so that there is this care that comes to this heavy subject matter. Like for this image over here, I use public domain images from the Miami-Dade Public Library that you could see of like Black individuals within different parts of Miami, I believe around like Overtown. So figuring out what subject matter calls into that narrative that I'm trying to place here. So yeah, just figuring out how to be respectful and also how to take into consideration the history of archival practices, especially with the subject matter when it comes to Black people and how they've been objectified, especially with the history of postcards, the history of photography, and just the history of colonialism and how that has carried on into the study of archives. So when it comes to Black subject matter, I tend to at least come in with care, and especially realize like what subjects I want to highlight and what subjects I want to remove, so that there is that level of agency when it comes to what images I'm going to use.
So what approach do you take to the initial piece? Do you already have a piece in mind and an idea?
It's mostly an intuitive practice, honestly. I think within the last few years, I've been focusing on Yoruba cosmology. So anything connected to just the study of the world, especially with the connections to Yoruba and Santeria, Voodoo, Candomblé, like looking into just those subject matters and figuring out how can I approach archives, how can I approach history, and figuring out what images would suit that for the most part.
Most part. Can you take me through your studio? Because it's super cozy.
Yes. So here I have this area. This is mostly like my table area. I also have my sewing machine, since I do a lot more fiber.
You do sew too, yeah.
Yeah, and then I also have a few objects here. I do have a few shells. Most of these come from like Florida estate sales. So I look into just the connection of shells and how that is also aligned with the story of water, how it moves, also as a place of shelter, especially for those who were seeking shelter during the transatlantic slave trade. So kind of feeling where I could use like materials that are not that don't have like a living aspect of it, and using that as like a vessel really for these like topics of memory. Also just the history, I kind of want to play homage to it or use it as like an altar space.
So what's a typical day look like for you?
I mean, it varies depending on what I want to focus on. Right now, I've kind of been focusing on indigo dyeing. So I kind of
Really?
So I have a little sample.
Is that it?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
So I have those. I've been playing around with like batik patterns here too.
Oh, I love that.
So like figuring out how to play around with indigo, because I've been working with indigo for a few years. So figuring out like just ideas of movement really, because indigo does play a lot in terms of like the clothing industry, and also how that has been an industry here in Florida, specifically during the I forgot.
We had a whole, well, I guess that's what Wynwood used to be, like the fabric district or the...
Exactly, yeah. Just that aspect of how there has been this industry of indigo, and how Black individuals have been cultivating the plant themselves here, like traditionally, especially how these have kind of been valued from that colonial aspect too.
How is the process? Is it difficult?
It's not that bad.
Or just time consuming?
It depends, honestly. For the batiks, it does take a longer time because of the wax, but I feel like for the indigo, it just depends on what tying technique I'm gonna do for the indigo.
Right. And you have a whole lot.
Yeah, this is a whole drawer. I also have cyanotypes here too, because I do like the relationship of cyanotypes with indigo.
Oh, I love this.
So like a lot of the poetry that I add into it, because I also write as well, I include the water too, just reflections that I have. Like a lot of the work that I do tends to be a reflection on like just the idea of memory, and especially time, this idea of timelessness, and how like as Black individuals and how they occupy space, this idea of double consciousness comes up. And then also just cosmology coming into it, like different layers of how Black people occupy space. I'm kind of trying to figure out how we could at least create some sort of like poetic aesthetic to it too.
And your poetry, so you write as well?
Yes, I do. A lot of the writing I do comes into like book form, so I also do bookmaking as well.
You do bookmaking?
Yeah, it's a lot that I do. But I think like it just depends on the project really. Like what am I gravitating towards? What medium do I feel like I could utilize in terms of like expressing myself, or just these dark themes really. Like usually because of the heaviness of the themes, I tend to at least create this what do you call it? This layer of reflection.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And there's so much storytelling in your work too.
Mm-hmm.
So it's so apropos.
Yeah, like I've attended a few workshops in terms of like how storytelling connects back to mythology,
Yes.
and how this idea of preserving language or just the exchange of language can at least create this like blossoming of creativity, or this blossoming of like relationships and how one interacts with the world, especially with how like now and how we see ourselves moving around. It tends to be like it feels a bit disconnected really. Like it feels a bit hard for people to focus on like what's truly going on and not feeling as grounded. So I feel like within this moment yeah, just figuring out ways where people can at least like return back to the body. That's what I'm kind of thinking about.
Who are some of your favorite poets and artists that inspire your work?
I really like Audre Lorde a lot. Her work is beautiful. Also, Toni Morrison, I mentioned earlier. In terms of artists, I really am inspired by Renee Stout and her work, and how she really is involving cosmology, objects, narratives too into her work, and how she utilizes assemblage in this way of creating her own storytelling.
Oh my gosh.
Mm-hmm.
So you also recently won an Oolite.
Yes.
How was that experience? So congratulations, by the way.
Thank you. It's been good for the most part. I mean, I've just been utilizing the time and energy to at least continue on the project, which connects back to Yoruba mappings, and how that is kind of like looking into Miami as a site of spirituality.
Nice.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my gosh. I'm very excited for your project.
Thank you.
Can you show me some of these?
Yes, these are actually cyanotypes that I bleached, and this one is
Wow.
toned with coffee. So I use like natural materials as well to create dyes too. So I've been experimenting with like just forage plants that I have really, and then also like household materials, and then also the spiritual significance of coffee as it is being used on the altar too. So looking into like herbs and other sources that also are connected to like spiritual goodness.
So you have a whole series here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, these are just different tests that I have. So like this one I sewed up, that still needs to be stuffed. This one as well. And then this one is originally dyed with coffee, and then these are pastels, I believe, that I made. Yeah. Of like outlines of horses and dogs, and how these are also connected back to the drum here. So that's the plan, to put this in the drum.
In the drum. Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So it'll be incorporated there.
Mm-hmm. As like this connection back to Shango, who is one of the deities within Yoruba mythology / religion, and how this idea of the drum playing a role in terms of like power, and also this idea of this idea of power really, and how one can create their own strength through the beat of the drum.
How about this?
This one is also a cyanotype that I bleached and also toned with this coffee as well, so you can kind of see how this is the original bleach here. And then this is the coffee as like a border around it here.
It's so beautiful. I don't even know if the camera will do it justice. Oh, I just love that.
Thank you.
This is yours?
Mm-hmm.
Oh.
And then this is also like an image that I found from Internet Archive that features Florida seashells. So looking into like just books really, or like scientific illustrations or diagrams.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So you have here for the fabric.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So how the space lends itself out to you doing the type of work you do, or do you have to go outside for anything? Or
I mostly like when I initially did the cyanotypes, I worked at a print studio, so I had access to like an exposure unit and also like a lighting table, so I was able to at least develop my images there.
Yeah.
But in terms of like working in this space, it's mostly been like my drawing, mostly dyeing work, but anything print related will be outside of the studio.
Are you gonna incorporate the boxes as well? Like I
Yeah.
love jewelry boxes.
Like these boxes, I'm going to reuse and then create imagery within these slots here.
Oh, that is so cool.
That's the plan. And then like this is like a photo book box. So like this is like slots where I could put photos here. So I'm thinking of putting like collages here. And then these are also like some cigar boxes. So I'm thinking about like location as well. So thinking about how I could at least reflect the location of the box into the image here. Yeah.
Have you experienced any challenges at all? Have you encountered any? And how do you deal with that when you kind of reach should I say any stagnant, which happens to a lot of artists? How do you tackle getting out of that headspace?
For me, it's very hard, honestly, when I'm in that headspace, because it could take me months for me to come back into like that pattern of working.
Yeah.
So I feel as though like I have to take time for myself in order for me to figure out what I truly want when it comes to me approaching the work. Just thinking about the practice itself in order for me to figure out how can I at least approach the work that I'm doing without hesitation.
Right. Right. And in terms of future goals, do you have any in mind that you want to do?
Yeah, I was thinking of possibly creating more prints so that I could create more zines / books, and this idea of printmaking I'm kind of returning back into. So since it's been a while, I would say like a few months since I've done prints, but yeah, just looking forward to that, and then also figuring out how I can immerse myself back into bookmaking, since that's what I'm kind of like figuring out, like especially with this image, I'm trying to see like how I could create like more of a accordion fold with the book. So I've been testing out just the orientation of pages, and then these are also going to be part of my sketchbook since I've mostly been building up the sketchbook. So let me pull this out.
I love looking through artist sketchbooks.
Like it's just a lot of pages that I'm trying to figure out. So like these are prints, this is sketches, like this is a print that I have that I'm trying to open up to see if I could at least have like interactive pages here. So like just all the research that I've been doing in terms of spirituality, also just like nature itself and how that is also tied into it too, seeing elements as well like earth, wind, fire, water, just how at least there is that connection that I have with them, really. And then we'll just flip through. So like just figuring out what to do for the slots here. And then this one too.
Oh, I love this.
That's why I was thinking about the horses as well, so you can kind of see.
The faces are, because do you work with masks at all? But they're definitely...
I don't work with masks, but I was also thinking about masks too, like in the sense of like how these are arranged, like figuring out how I create my own figures with them being inspired by like old artifacts connected back to Nigeria and stuff.
Nigeria. Is that where your family's from?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah. Both of my parents are from Nigeria, but I was born and raised here.
And it has some influence, obviously, in your work.
Yeah. And I think throughout the years, too, just hearing how there's other people who are connected back to Yoruba culture, especially within the Cuban community here.
Yeah.
And how some people do have that connection with Santeria. I feel like that's what also led me into this pathway of figuring out how Yoruba has also, like, created other like derived religions, and how there is this unity and there is this connection that comes from these different religions and spirituality.
And are you really religious or no? Or you just...
I would say I'm more on the spiritual side of things. I mean, I do appreciate just how everything has been set up, especially with like Yoruba cosmology, but I was raised Christian, So I do also have that background as well, just like that aspect of learning the Bible too, and reading scripture as well, and how that is a connection as well in terms of like just prayer and like sacredness. So there is that back and forth where I kind of like, okay, let me take some elements here, but then also bring it into my own spiritual practice.
Right. I thought I was the only one that had essential oil.
No, I need them.
Oh my gosh. Can you tell me how you use them?
These, I just have them just to sniff, at least just so I could bring myself into calmness.
Yeah, be grounded.
Mm-hmm.
Gosh.
Yeah, and that's pretty much it. Just sketching, figuring out what books to make. Like, these are supposed to be for a future prayer book, so thinking about what text can go into it too. Yeah, it's just a lot of planning that I've been doing, just figuring out like how I should at least finish this sketchbook before I think about how I could print the sketchbook out.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just obsessed with your shelves. But you have some books as well. Are these your favorite?
These are some books that I've collected. This one I've collected from the Miami Book Fair. Some of them I've collected from my job at the museum. And then others I've also collected from this bookstore in London that has like a large collection of like African, Asian artist books too. So there's just like a peep of this. Like you can kind of see how there's a play.
Yeah.
Like I just love books that have a plain text, books that I could get inspired by, like especially this one since it has like a lot of archival elements too. But yeah, just a few things to inspire me.
And you worked in a museum, or you're still working?
I'm still working at the museum.
Which museum?
I work at the Museum of Contemporary Art in North Miami.
Wow,
So
how
I'm a
is
museum
that?
Educator.
You're a museum educator. That's great.
Yeah, it's really nice just being able to immerse myself in that museum space. Since it's been a while for me, I think the last time I worked in a museum space was in like middle school or high school.
Yeah.
So that also kind of reconnected me back into how I see my work being installed, or just see what artists I could be inspired by as well. But yeah, like I just love working at museums, or just spaces that provide like refuge in terms of art making.
And so how do you balance? Like, how do you balance coming to the studio? Because you do work. So how do you do both?
It's a struggle.
It's a struggle.
Let me
Yes.
tell you, it is a struggle in terms of like going back and forth. But I am grateful that the studio is not too far from me, since it's like a 15-minute drive. So it's pretty decent. But I mean, in terms of balancing it, I try to come in around the earlier days of the week. So Monday to Wednesday, I try to come in here within the afternoon or at night. And then Thursday to Sunday, that's when I tend to work at the museum. So that's pretty much my schedule.
And in terms of what's next for you, would you envision an entire exhibition in your mind in terms of what you want to do next?
I don't know. I mean, I could see myself doing like an exhibition style, but I also see the idea of accessibility when it comes to museum work, and then also just what places would I want to see my work. Like I was thinking of having it at a library, since it's more accessible, or making it at least interact more with like the space itself, you know, like but it just depends. Hello.
Hi.
But yeah, it just depends, honestly, on like what work I will produce and where I will see it fit, you know.
So how is it working with the whole group? Because are you by yourself then mostly?
Yeah, mostly I'm here by myself, or my studio mate next door would be here. So we tend to like work on indigo dyes, like if we have time, or if not, we'll just be like in our own space pretty much.
Okay. So I'm just curious, if you could collaborate with any artist, living or dead, who would it be?
That is tough, honestly. I also do like Ana Mendieta's work.
I totally see that.
A lot, like
I see a lot like of influence. I totally see that. It's probably why I love you so much. I love your work because it's very similar to that kind of work of spirituality and the body.
The body, like just what are remnants? Like, how can you leave your mark? Like, what are the archives that you're leaving for yourself? I feel like with her work and how she documented it, that's what I really like too, especially with her performance work.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Have you delved into performance art?
I tried in my undergrad, like just one project I tried in performance, but it was okay. But I do like the idea of performance and the idea of movement, especially with dance too, and how that is also a spiritual element. Like,
yeah, big time. Yeah.
Mm-hmm, especially with music too, like just how, I don't know, there is something about the body and how it moves that I'm really interested in that I haven't unlocked. So maybe
that. So do you have any advice for any younger people that are maybe starting out? They might be in art school, they might be going to school. Is there anything you wish you were told before you got into the field? Any challenges and the good stuff too? Anything you want to say?
I think just what I remember is like trying to find what you like. Like, do the research for yourself, what you're interested in, what motivates you, what you connect with, because that can also gear you towards like the subject matter that you want to explore within your own artwork. Because I feel as though like at times when I was in my undergrad, I felt a bit lost in terms of what I wanted to do, and then remembering how I had to finish my undergrad during the pandemic too.
You did?
Mm-hmm. It was a lot. It was a lot.
How was that experience?
It was a bit chaotic. I remember not taking as many classes as I wanted to. It was just a whole hassle. And then I remember having to fly out for one class during the summer, and that was my printmaking class. So that's what really introduced me to that. But also, yeah, just taking time to research and also experiment with different mediums, figuring out what outlets you want to find yourself to.
Right.
Like, especially if you have that one medium that you really like and tie yourself to, find other ways that you can express yourself, because that can also lead into different pathways and you can also connect it back to your own work.
Yeah, that's great advice.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Fola, for giving me your time today. I just love your work. I'm so excited about what's coming next.
Thank you so much. I'm excited just being here and talking with you. Yeah. Thank you so much for letting me show up my space.
Thank you. And if you have questions for Fola or you want to contact her, anything at all, I'm going to leave her information down below. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.